Hey everyone, welcome to another hobby. Austin here. Today is day 3 of Inktober, so we're just gonna jump right in, spin these wheels. Alright, WWATTOBER and the official Inktober. Let's see what we got. Got an official one again today. Boots, that's boring. And WWATTOBER again. Seems this one's coming up a lot too. So I already did Floral Sheet Ghost by accident on day 1 because I made it my third list and somehow in my brain I got the third list mixed up with the third item on the list. So let's re-roll this one. Dibujista, something new. Flower. Alright, so boots and flower. Let's try adding a third thing like we've been doing every day so far and see what that does for us. Kicking the creative. Mask. Alright, so after thinking about it for a bit, I was considering doing something in 3D, but I think I'll save that for another day. I think what I'm just going to do is take these 3 words and use it as a prompt for a character design, and just do it in my own usual style that I do for drawing characters most of the time, and just have fun coming up with a character idea. So I was thinking that the way I'd work in the boots, because normally those aren't a very important part of character design for the most part. You kind of don't want people looking at a character's feet, generally speaking. I think what I'm going to do is have this character covered in like full body robes, so that basically they're just a piece of cloth with a mask and then boots showing underneath, so that those are kind of the main components of the character. And I think that'll be a way to kind of make the boots stand out. So I'm doing just like a really rough body shape, so I get the proportions kind of correct, even though they're just going to be covered by the cloak. And I was thinking I'll probably have their arm coming out of the cloak and holding like a walking staff or something. I'm going to give them a little bit of a cartoony-ish, bigger head. Actually, maybe that's just the mask, kind of a large decorative. I guess I'll give them slightly bigger feet than I normally would too, just to make the boots stand out. Maybe this is like a child. And then the way I was going to work flower into the design was probably going to be like the designs on the mask. Well, if they're holding a staff, maybe it's a design on the staff actually. It could be like carved into the shape of a flower. Maybe they're like a druid, potentially, like you might find in D&D. Mask a little bit more visual interest, a little bit more of a unique shape. So the difficulty in a drawing like this is going to be getting the symmetry on the mask correct. So if I'm having, detailed designs and I want it to be the same on both sides, really got to pay attention to the size and spacing of things. On the other hand, if I make the detail dense enough and just get it kind of close, that's the sort of thing you can kind of hide. A lot of people won't really notice if a couple pieces are not quite the same on each side. I always like a big scarf, although in this case maybe it'll be just part of the robe, extra material bunched up. Now what to do with these boots? Do I want them big and chunky, or more sleek and like elven, which seems to be a little bit more nature druidic style? I'm gonna try something a little different. I'm just gonna make a copy of that layer so I can go back to it if I don't like this, but I'm gonna try making this character a little taller, with the boots being a little smaller, but with the cloak kind of shorter. So there's a bit more of their leg coming out of the bottom. They don't have to have the cloak kind of resting on the boots. Their feet come out the bottom like this. And I think to have this work the way I'm kind of imagining in my head, the whole cloak would need to be wider, and I think the feet would need to be smaller, which might take away from the whole boot thing that I was talking about, making it stand out in the design. But let's see what it looks like if we do that kind of thing. I do think I like this better. So it's a little less boot-centered on the design, but I think overall it makes for a better character, and really I'm just using the prompts to kind of give me inspiration to get started on stuff. I'm not necessarily concerned with following things to the letter all the time and really like hampering myself with the rules. I want the rules to empower my art and not restrict it. I want it to give me enough restriction to make me feel creative, like I have to figure out solutions to work around some things, but when I feel like I got to a place that I like because of that, and that goes against the rules, that's when I'm willing to let the rules go out the window, because I'd rather do something I like if it comes down to that versus something that I don't like that follows the rules perfectly. I do feel like these boots still need something unique about them though, something that makes them stand out. Either design on them, or their shape, or something about them that tells a story. You know, if this character is like a traveling character, I'm gonna give these boots just a little bit more heft so I have more space to give them some detail. But if this person is traveling a lot, what if their boots getting very worn out over time and they've been patched to high heaven? Gonna have like leather patches sewn onto them. Maybe this one's got like a chunk of iron mounted to the side. Like, I don't know, they were in a dwarven tunnel at one point and got a smith to help fix their boots or something. Yeah, I think that could be fun. Mask is really not very aerodynamic with it curving forward like this. Really catch the wind. Bad for a traveler moving quickly. Guess they gotta move slow. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe their part of their religion is about taking it slow and smelling the flowers along the way, and this mask kind of represents that because of it being not very aerodynamic. Doesn't make any sense because it's not like you could really move fast enough to have that matter, but it's always fun to think about that kind of character story stuff when you're working on these kinds of things. Alright, so this section right here, this curve, is going to be a little hard to figure out what's actually happening there in three-dimensional space. Is it like a smooth curve? Maybe this is kind of bending in a bit. Alright, let's add a bunch of details to this mask just to give it visual interest. And lots of detail and contrast like that will draw the eye, which you want. You want the viewer to look at the face of the character for the most part. I know in this case we also want them to look at the boots, and the boots will have detail too, but preferably you have them look at the face first at least. I actually just did a drawing kind of similar to this the other night. Character wearing a mask with a bunch of detail work on it. So I'm in the right mindset for that already. If I remember to, I'll put a picture of that up on screen. You can see this is where that spacing and mirror symmetry starts to get finicky, because these two pieces here are much closer together than these two. So I'm gonna have to kind of squash and stretch things around a bit to try and make it actually symmetrical. And I can tell I'm already getting too low on this side compared to this side. We'll have like a gem or something on the forehead, some kind of centerpiece for this filigree to go around. Doing these kinds of designs around the front part of the face, the nose and mouth area, can start to get kind of potentially dangerous just to have forms read as something you don't want them to. Like say I put a swirl here and a swirl here, and suddenly you've got like a snout nose. I don't want things to read as facial features here, so I'm going to deliberately try to put them in places where facial features aren't, in shapes where they don't read as facial features, hopefully. The mind is really good at turning anything near eyes into facial features, so that easier said than done. There's a chance that already people are reading these two swirls as nostrils. And I think the easiest way to avoid it is just not putting things there. I'm going to leave a sort of blank space around the mouth and nose area here. One good way to check is to flip your canvas. You can really see where this like horn, I guess you might call it, closer to the staff is quite a lot bigger than the other, which becomes apparent when you flip the canvas like this. So I'm gonna fix that. Just to help me out with the symmetry stuff, I'm gonna draw in some contour lines to give me reference points. Alright, so I could spend all day working on this weird complex shape that I've decided to draw for some reason, but I think I've got it close enough that it's readable, and I should be able to put the details onto it without it messing up too much. So let's continue with those. So I want this contour to be a little bit more obvious, but without having to draw those contour lines on the actual line art. So what I think I'm going to do is add these kind of border style dividers, I guess you might call them, that kind of divide the mask up into a couple of sections. And those will follow the contour lines to hopefully make it a little bit more obvious what the actual shape of this thing is. I think that works. The cloak, I think, works better being mostly plain. We'll just give it like a trim, maybe a bit of really simple geometrical design on it. I don't know, some squares, just so it doesn't draw your eye too much. The focus of this character shouldn't be the cloak, hopefully. And having these designs closer to the boots might help with drawing the eye towards the boots too, rather than the cloak itself. Drawing hands holding sticks like this is always hard. Never be afraid to use some reference. That's something that's taken me a long time to internalize, and I'd say I'm still pretty bad about it. I always forget to or feel like it's cheating somehow. For the ink, Clip Studio has these awesome vector layers, so I can switch my eraser to a vector eraser, and then when I draw lines on this, if I have any lines that cross, I can just erase that line up to the edge. It makes doing this kind of line work so much nicer. And it also has stabilization, which makes these large curves really nice too. I can just go like, and it's nice and smooth. And if I feel like the line is close but not quite there, I don't have to redraw it every time. I can just use these vector tools to kind of push and pull things where I need them to be. If you're wondering what that big green smudge was, that's simplifying the vector line. When you draw a line that's, fairly complex, it adds all these points along it. But if you do this simplify vector line thing, it gets rid of, a fair amount, depending on what your settings are like. Can reduce the complexity, and then it makes pushing and pulling a little bit better too. It makes it less jittery and weird because it has smoother transitions. Another nice thing about these vector lines is you can, copy and paste them. And then if I shrink this down, follow that secondary curve there, it'll match up. And then even though it's too thick, I can do this correct line width thing, set it to narrow, and then if I paint over this line a couple of times, bam, got a narrow line. These lines meeting up here is called tangenting. You should avoid it where you can, like see how this line meets up with this line, and this one meets up with this one, and this one meets up with this one. Generally bad practice. Avoid it if you can. I'm just not going to bother because I don't care too much about it for this piece. You won't be looking at this part too much, hopefully, but it can draw the eye and be a little distracting for some. Here I'm using this vector drawing to my advantage, doing a lot of crossing lines, but for drawing these straight line repeating patterns, doing this and then erasing all of the crossing over bits really makes this a lot easier. It keeps the line across consistent over all of these different squares, and it keeps the pattern looking a little bit less hand-drawn and messy. Here I'm just drawing in some wood grain, and I'm using it to try and also show some of the shape and the contour, having it look like it's carved. I'm doing that by connecting the wood grain past these separation points, so it looks less like it's made out of separate pieces. If I have the wood grain continue across, it makes it feel more like it's carved out of one piece. Also having the wood grain not necessarily follow the contours when things go really horizontal, like these petals, because wood grain doesn't, you know, bend unless it's carved out of branches that were already that shape, I guess. Having the wood grain kind of stay vertical also kind of should help make it feel like it's more carved out of a single piece, I guess. Alright, I think for color I'm going to keep it simple. I've been working on this for a while now, and I'm just going to put in some flat colors and call it done. Alright, I guess that's that character done. Thanks for watching me explore another hobby, and have a good one.